Have you ever hired the wrong person? The Manager Code Deciphered. Fewer errors, more success. We know that hiring the wrong person costs you time and money and schedule and production and esteem and a host of other tangible and intangible resources. We also know that hiring the wrong person is a symptom of not recognizing which operational patterns are required for successful performance for that task, and of not recognizing which patterns the applicants have. What if there was a way to avoid hiring the wrong person? I've got a solution for you, but first let me tell you my story, because my work history, my education, and my consulting experience have put me in a unique position to teach you how to always hire the right person and keep from hiring the wrong person. I'm Roger Bailey. I'm in my late 70s, and since 62, when I graduated from high school, I've worked and consulted and taught all over the USA, throughout the Americas, and Europe. In 62, I joined the U.S. Navy as an electronic technician and served until 66. After the Navy, I worked at IBM from 66 until 80, when I left to start my training and consulting career. At IBM, I started as an electronic technician repairing card punch machines, and over the years I ended up as a senior programmer analyst working on IBM's most popular mainframe operating system called virtual machines. During those years at IBM, I earned a BS in anthropology at Fordham and an MS in counseling from the University of Bridgeport, and I've completed additional postgrad studies in applied linguistics. How could I possibly have information about how to avoid hiring the wrong person? It comes from my computer hardware and software experience, my academic studies, and my work in linguistics. And because of all of that, I understand how our human brains are operating in many ways like a computer. I've developed a model, a process, a system for understanding and predicting human behavior and performance. And my model helps managers hire the right person and then train and motivate and influence them so that they deliver the results their organization wants from them and also keeps them happy and productive at their job. I call this model the Language and Behavior Lab Profile. Let me give you a peek into my approach. Every time a person speaks, they give us clues about how their brain operates. These clues show us their functional brain architecture. For instance, we know that some folks focus on what is working, and other folks focus on what is not working. Toward and away from are the common labels for this form of brain function. Toward folks tend to notice the parts that are working correctly, and they sort of gloss over minor functional faults. Away from folks cannot stop themselves from noticing and reacting to what is not working correctly. Toward folks are best in design and production of products and services. Away from folks are best in maintenance and quality assurance tasks. A manager's best practice is to put these two kinds of folks in tasks appropriate for how that person's brain normally and naturally works. And of course, some managers already know this way of thinking about tasks and already have their own process of finding folks for tasks based on their normal natural tendencies. But many other managers are not aware of these kinds of concepts about a person's performance tendencies and are not aware of how much these concepts relate to proper performance of the tasks they manage. I refer to toward and away from, goal-oriented versus avoidance-oriented, for these two types of folks. Most folks are either motivated to get the proper solution toward or to avoid some impending failure away from. And of course, in every successful organization, there are tasks which specifically require one or the other of these performance capabilities. When you're in a hiring or recruiting mode, you need to keep in mind which of these motivational and operational tendencies you're searching for. Am I hiring for production or for quality assurance? And of course, what about some of the other characteristics needed for proper performance of all the tasks in the organization? In the lab profile, toward and away from are two patterns in the category called motivation direction. The lab profile has 55 patterns across 17 categories. And if you are going to hire the right person every time, you will have to be paying attention to many more factors than simply toward and away from patterns. I know this sounds like a very complex approach, but it's really quite simple and easy to understand and to use. I've developed an interview which gets people to reveal all of their patterns across all of those 17 categories. This lab profile interview usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and upon completion, you know each of this person's patterns in each of the lab profile's 17 categories. Of course, you can learn how to do this, identify a person's patterns, by completing my online lab profile training program. But how do you know which patterns you need to find in the people you need to hire? Actually, this part's really simple. You interview your best performance at a particular task and find out which patterns are common among those good performers. When you need more people for that task, you attract and hire more of those same kinds of folks. You hire those who already have those same in common lab profile patterns which your top performers also have. Maybe you're asking yourself if it is possible or even likely for your top performers to have a common set of patterns. When you look at the patterns of your top performers, some of the patterns are common and some are not common across the whole group. This simply shows you which patterns are required for top level performance at this task, the ones which are in common. Those non-conforming patterns scattered around your top performers are simply the indications of various individual uniqueness in that group. Your top performing group is not a bunch of robots, but each of your top performers at each task will tend to have those common necessary patterns for top level performance at that task. And the lab profile helps you identify and utilize this knowledge. If you also go in and interview those who have not performed at top levels in that task, you can really start to understand more clearly that the common patterns of your top performers is what is required for top level performance at that task, because your less productive folks will have fewer of those productive patterns. So when it is necessary to hire more folks at that task for replacement or for expansion, you will have a standard showing you which patterns are needed for top level performance at that task in your organization. The task for hiring more for that task becomes simply a follow the successful recipe situation. For each of the patterns of the lab profile, there is language which motivates people who have that specific pattern. So if you need to attract a replacement or additional folks with that particular pattern set, you can describe the task, including those words and phrases, and that description becomes very attractive to folks with those patterns. And of course, you can use that language with your existing people to motivate and influence them. With the lab profile, deciding about candidates becomes easier because you know how to recognize those matching candidates for the task. Because of this, finding replacements who have the needed patterns becomes easier. And because you know the motivating language of those with those patterns, it becomes even easier to attract them and to get them to accept positions with you. Let's face it, if you know how to motivate an individual and a team of individuals, your job as manager of that team becomes less stressful and more fulfilling for you and for your team. You want to know how to hire the right person and avoid hiring the wrong person for the job. The lab profile approach does that. It teaches you how to recognize the thinking and behavior patterns of your top performers in a task, and it teaches you how to attract and then recognize which applicants have those needed patterns. It even teaches you how to motivate and influence those applicants. If you want to know more about this process, click the link in the description and learn more about how to stop hiring the wrong person.